Learning English with English Faculties. Today we will understand the short story by Philip K. Dick, The Cookie Lady.
At the dinner table, Ralph Surley hears a faint tapping sound over the heavy windstorm outside. He opens his front door to find a gray bundle of dry, withered weeds bouncing against his legs. These gray weeds and rags are the physical remains of his son, Bubber. After a series of visits to a neighbor's house, the boy has been reduced to a dry, unrecognizable mass. Philip K. Dick constructs this horrific outcome without employing blood, violent struggle, or any traditional markers of supernatural horror. He subverts the horror genre by discarding the Gothic vampire. In its place, he presents a system of parasitic exchange operating within the quiet routines of American suburbia. We expect predatory horror to unfold in isolated castles under the cover of night. Dick places his threat at the end of Elm Street on a warm, sunny Wednesday afternoon. The environment is defined by working-class youth routines, like Ernie Mill shouting across the street while fixing papers for his delivery route. The setting communicates safety and community integration. Mrs. Drew is an elderly widow, defined by her decaying property and social isolation. Her house is a shabby gray box with sagging porch steps, making her appear more like a relic of the past than a predator. Replacing an aristocratic predator with an overlooked suburban widow alters the nature of the encounter. The threat relies on domestic hospitality rather than violent invasion. Dick establishes the predator's starting condition through specific lexical markers of decay. Mrs. Drew's house is heavily surrounded by old, dry weeds, mapping her biological deficit directly onto the entire physical property. To bridge the gap between her domain and the neighborhood children, she uses biochemical bait. Warm, fresh cookies with nuts and raisins resting on a big blue plate on top of the kitchen stove. Bubber Searle is the optimal host because of his physiology. He is a plump adolescent whose primary motivation is philetony, making him a high-yield, very easily manipulated biological energy source. We can track the biological transaction between the two characters using a vitality ledger. Bubber begins with maximum youth and vitality, while Mrs. Drew sits at a near-total deficit. Bubber's appetite acts as a bypass to his own self-preservation instincts. Driven by hunger, the host walks into the predator's localized extraction zone. The energy extraction occurs through reading sessions. Mrs. Drew requires Bubber to sit stationary on the couch, very close to her, and read aloud. She ignores the content of the books. Her focus is on sensory consumption, drinking in every frown of concentration, the sound of his voice, and the physical wobbling of his fat cheeks. On the vitality ledger, we see the siphon in action. As Bubber reads, his energy drains, filling Mrs. Drew proportionally. But this process has a limitation. When Bubber breaks physical proximity, a connection severs, rapidly returning her to a withered state. The transference engine currently requires continuous, localized proximity to function. Because the energy dissipates when the boy leaves, the predator must cultivate an addiction in the host to ensure he returns. Bubber's parents observe the physical toll. His mother notices he is worn out and rubbing his aching head. His father observes the fatigue but misdiagnoses the cause. He views Bubber's washed-out appearance as normal adolescent tiredness resulting from humoring a neighbor, completely missing the parasitic drain. On his final walk to the house, Bubber is severely lethargic, but consumerist distractions blind him to his failing biology. He stops to look at comic books outside McVein's drugstore, treating the day like any other day. Inside the pharmacy, he spots a woman drinking a large chocolate soda. The desire for sugar causes his mouth to water, overriding his physical weariness and propelling him toward the final visit. Parental misinterpretation and adolescent consumerism act as fatal blind spots. The surrounding neighborhood fails to recognize the threat, leaving the host isolated and entirely unprotected for the final extraction. For the last visit, the lamp and table that previously separated them are completely gone. Mrs. Drew has moved her chair directly next to Bubber's spot on the couch. Forbidden from returning, she escalates the process, placing her thin, dry hand directly on his arm. Direct tactile contact triggers an unrecoverable acceleration of energy transfer. She feels his youth flowing directly through her fingers, moving into total extraction. Mrs. Drew becomes lithe and throaty, while Bubber turns dead white and completely dull. physical contact overrides the proximity limitation, shifting the process into a permanent, total extraction of vitality. This final state of the vitality ledger shows a permanent inversion. Bubber leaves the house empty, and Mrs. Drew's physical youth remains intact after he walks out the door. The narrative relies on thermodynamic conservation. Youth is a finite biological resource, neither created nor destroyed, only transferred. Bubber's walk home demonstrates the physiological reality of a human body operating with zero remaining vitality. The cold wind penetrates his clothing, and he physically collapses into the elements. The transference engine is a closed-loop system. Mrs. Drew's permanent physical rejuvenation strictly required Bubber's total biological bankruptcy. The story opens by describing the dry, rustling weeds overgrowing the front of Mrs. Drew's house. By the final page, Bubber has physically transformed into that exact material. His parents sit safely inside their dining room, listening to the wind howl outside, unaware that the tapping at their front door is the brittle remains of their own son. Dick masks the systemic extraction of life as domestic hospitality. The result is a corpse so thoroughly depleted, it is unrecognizable even to its own parents.